Karen is awake.
Greetings, netizens of YouTube.
Why, hello, Eric. I kind of found your video through, I think it was Skeptor, and I just had to add my 2 cents, so let's get on with it.
Since I deemed fit to give a message to feminists, please click on my face if you haven't seen it. It's only fair that I give anti-feminists the benefit of my advice.
Benefit? That remains to be seen.
This is my message to anti-feminists. I'm going to address 3 broad subcategories of people here.
Let me guess. You're going to talk about these 3 groups. Traditionalist anti-feminists, who oppose feminism because it undermines traditional institutions like marriage and family. Equalitarian anti-feminists, who oppose feminism because it doesn't actually promote equality. And conscientious anti-feminists, who oppose feminism because it's based largely on lies, half-truths, chicanery, and special pleading, promotes animosity toward men, and causes division between the sexes. Are these the 3 groups that you're going to address? Just by the way, I fall into the 3rd category mostly. Guess not.
The first grouping I'm going to refer to are non-feminists, which hold a critical position of feminism, but who are open to reason.
Huh. That's very strange. I used to be a non-feminist, but the more I listened to reason, the more anti-feminist I became.
Please try to remember that many feminists don't deny your concerns.
Oh, I know. The nominal feminists, the coffee shop feminists, are often very willing to acknowledge the concerns of non-feminists and anti-feminists. It's just the formally educated ones that, the ones leading major feminist organizations and lobby groups, the ones with best-selling books on feminism, and the ones situated in media, academia, and politics who seem most interested in denying our concerns.
It is possible to find common ground.
I've been at this actively for about 6 years and investigating and discussing feminism for almost 9. I have yet to see this possibility of finding common ground come to fruition. Way back in the early days, before I started my blog and then my channel, I spent a fair amount of time talking to feminists on feminist subreddits and in other feminist spaces online. All I usually got for my trouble was insults and accusations and a lot of really interesting dishonesty. For instance, way back in 2010, I got into a discussion on R Feminism's subreddit. I think it was about circumcision, and HIV. And there was one commenter that seemed to be intentionally misinterpreting everything that I said. I mean, it was obvious that it was intentional. For example, I'd leave a comment that says, "A lot of you seem to believe MRAs think all women deserve to be raped. That's just wrong." The commenter would then quote, "All women deserve to be raped," and respond to that one phrase with outrage and shock. This went on for some time until I started to realize what was happening. I logged out and discovered that all of my actual comments had been deleted. They were only visible to me when I logged in, and they were not visible to anyone else. And all that was left from them were the pieces the other commenter had quoted, attributed to me. Interesting, isn't it? And then there was also that conversation I had where a feminist went and scooped 3 or 4 of my previous comments and did a detailed analysis of all of my mannerisms in order to prove I was really a man, and could therefore be ignored, since it was obvious I was just a loser who couldn't get a girlfriend or something. It might interest you to know that accusations of me really being a man were so common from feminists, I started my YouTube channel largely to put the rumors to rest. And of course, the channel then took off in a way my blog never did, and I have almost 130,000 subscribers. I get invited to speak at political events and universities, and I've been able to make this work my main source of income. All of it thanks to those very first feminists I debated on Reddit who kept insisting I was actually a man, or an ugly woman who was just trying to get attention from men, or something like that. Now, since starting my channel, I have been accused by feminists like Dr. Christina Stasia at the University of Alberta of being unwilling to debate feminists in public. Of course, when a third party tried to set up a debate between myself and Dr. Stasia, she didn't respond to his multiple emails, direct messages, and tweets. When I sat on a panel with Naomi Wolf to discuss the question, is feminism necessary, she ended up losing her temper, dropping an F-bomb, and calling me a rape apologist for having the gall to say rape is a crime that's based entirely on consent. She asked if I would provide her with evidence for some of the claims I'd made, and I told her to just email me and I'd send them right along. And she never did. When I was interviewed by Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, he blew a gasket, started shouting yada yada yada, and demanded I make him a ham sandwich. David Pakman asked specifically for an anecdote, then asserted that my entire opposition to feminism was probably based solely on that anecdote, claimed he was so confused by my opinions, accused me of strawmanning feminism, then grabbed the last word and hung up. That's what I get. That's the common ground. The feminists who call themselves feminists because they agree with the dictionary definition, they tend to be a little more open to our concerns about feminism. And quite often, they stop calling themselves feminists once they're exposed to those concerns.
There are issues of agreement such as male homelessness, male incarceration, or paternity leave that can be reached.
Not with the feminists who matter. For example, male incarceration. The gender gap in the criminal justice process in the U.S. is estimated to be 6 times larger than the race gap between blacks and white. There are no feminist groups attempting to narrow this gap. In fact, if you like, I can point you to feminist groups who are trying to widen it even further by advocating even more lenient treatment for women. Feminists applauded a pilot program in California a few years ago that would mandate the immediate release of women convicted of nonviolent offenses and the switch to community sentences, a program aimed at mitigating overpopulation in prisons. Of course, if this program were to be applied to men, it would free up about 5 times more space in prison than by only applying it to women, at least 5 times more. But no feminist groups, to my knowledge, have advocated it be expanded to nonviolent males. More than this, in the UK, if men were treated the way women are treated in the criminal system, it's estimated that 5 out of every 6 men currently in prison would not be there. Yet in 2010, Madam Justice Hale, on the advice of a report written by feminist groups, mandated that female criminals be treated even more leniently than they already were. She ordered judges and magistrates to discriminate in favor of female offenders. Her reasoning? A misplaced notion of equality results in some very unequal treatment of women and girls. When MP Philip Davies broke down the numbers on the gender gap in the system in the UK and presented them to a parliamentary committee, he found that the only area where feminists even showed any concern was the one area women suffered more. That is, women were more likely to be sentenced to probation and or fines than men were, and this represented hostile sexism against women. When he drew their attention to the fact that women receive more fines and probationary sentences than men do because men in the same position are sentenced to incarceration, their only answer was that the law treats men and women equally. Literally, they said this over and over and over again. The law treats men and women equally. He gave example after example of how men were treated more harshly than women systematically, and their response was that the law treats men and women equally. I can link you to that video if you like, Eric. It's quite amazing, really, how people with power in government can be so impervious to evidence and rational argument. But anyway, go on.
Many feminists will agree that radical feminism and certain individual feminists are not helping.
Yeah, agreeing that Dworkin was fucked right up. Yeah, that's pretty controversial. Not only was she bug-fuck insane, she's dead and can't defend herself. Do you think that the feminists in the parliamentary committee were helping by ignoring or dismissing scads of carefully compiled statistical data and repeating ad nauseum the law treats men and women equally, even though there was an official mandate from on high that judges must treat women even more leniently than they were doing before?
If you engage in the right spirit.
I think I will post a link to that committee session with Philip Davies. I'd challenge you to point out how his engagement with the committee was not in the right spirit. I also wonder how you'd describe the spirit of the subreddit r feminisms when they selectively quoted and then deleted my comments to make it look like I was saying things that I wasn't.
Practice nuance and don't be confrontational.
Practice nuance. What, pray tell, is nuanced about the assertion that men are privileged and women are oppressed? What is nuanced about patriarchy theory? As for not being confrontational, you're assuming that people like me started out snarling and snapping and swinging our fists. That's actually not how I started out. I've been at this for over 6 years, and I was a very nice person before that. For my troubles, I got called a fat, angry, neckbeard loser who lives in his mother's basement and can't get laid. I got quote-mined and defamed. I had hate blogs started that were devoted to slandering and insulting me. I've been called all kinds of horrible things, been accused of beating my children, and even of sexually abusing my daughter. I've had my channel attacked by false DMCA claims, and I've had people threaten me with harm. And oddly enough, the more confrontational and unapologetic I've become, the more popular I've gotten, and the less this kind of thing tends to happen.
This doesn't mean you have to change your position.
I'm really not against changing my position, Eric. I've done so in the past on certain issues, and I'm certainly open to doing so in the future. I've changed my position in the broader sense many times since beginning this journey, for instance. I used to consider myself an egalitarian, and now I don't. Not because I don't believe an egalitarian society would be nice, but because I think it's a pipe dream that will never be achieved, and that attempting to achieve some kind of utopia leads to really not very nice things happening.
It simply means that you recognize reality and create the conditions for a useful discussion.
Like when Dr. Christina Stasia went all over her Twitter claiming that Men's Rights Edmonton, with whom I am involved, don't show our faces in public, despite a photo gallery on our website with photos taken in public of us showing our faces. And like when someone asked her, who was that nice lady on the news last night then? She responded that, what she really meant to say was that we refused to debate feminists in public. And then when a third party reached out to her through 5 different avenues of communication over the course of 2 months to ask if she'd participate in an online debate with me, she never responded. You mean recognizing reality and creating the conditions for a useful discussion the way she did? How about getting called a rape apologist by a feminist who's made millions of dollars in book sales for saying that rape is a crime based entirely on consent? Is that useful?
To take an example, do not deny that there is a wage gap.
Okay. And how much room is there on Twitter for nuance? I mean, how can you do more than what Sargon did in 140 characters or less? You do realize that the wage gap, as it is described by people like Obama, is actually not real, right? He constantly implies or insinuates, or even outright states, that women earn 77 or 78 cents on a man's dollar for the same work because of workplace discrimination. And that is simply not true. Now, you can argue as to whether men and women choose different careers and make different work-life choices that result in different pay because of cultural sexism, or even that different fields earn different pay because some are dominated by men and others are dominated by women. But even that is going to be an uphill battle. There's plenty of evidence that the more free, modern, and prosperous a society is, the more pronounced many of these differences in choices become. There is more gender segregation in the workforce in Sweden and Canada than there is in China and India. The wage gap is wider in Norway than it is in Malawi. Are China, India, and Malawi less culturally sexist against women than Canada, Sweden, and Norway? More than this, what about the spending gap? Men and women have roughly equal spending power in the US, yet in order to have that equal spending power, men have to earn $1, and women have to only earn 78 cents. Why is this gap never included in a feminist analysis of the relative economic status of men and women? Why is it not even included as a potential contributing factor, in terms of women not having to make money the biggest priority, earnings their biggest priority when they look for work, and so maybe this is one of the reasons why the different choices exist. And how on earth can any of the nuance I've just provided be conveyed in 140 fucking characters or less, Eric? You do realize that Sargon has made videos that do provide nuance, right? So have lots of people.
Or talk about the wage gap myth.
The wage gap, as it is presented by people like Obama and lots of other feminists, is indeed a myth. One of the funniest things I've ever seen, and I'll link it if I can find it, was Press Secretary Jay Carney using all the same factors and arguments that Sargon and other anti-feminists use to debunk the wage gap myth to explain away Obama's own wage gap. You heard me. Female staff at the White House are paid about 10% less on average than male staff. And what did Jay Carney say about that? Well, that calculation doesn't take into account education level, hours worked, years of experience, job position and duties, time off, and other relevant factors. The White House pays men and women equally for the same work. Well, no duh. And yet the Obama administration keeps on repeating 77 cents on a man's dollar for the same work, despite it being completely bogus.
There is a wage gap. You are free to debate the extent of the gap with evidence and to postulate why that might be.
Which again is so easy to do in 140 characters. Please point me to any anti-feminist who claims that women and men on average earn the same money. Please point me to any non-feminist or anti-feminist debunking of the wage gap that does not acknowledge that women earn less on average than men. Please point me to any non-feminist or anti-feminist who does not list in their debunking the many, many factors that contribute to the overall wage gap between men and women. And yeah, Twitter doesn't count because, you know, nuance and 140 fucking characters don't exactly go together.
But when you deny the most basic fact...
Again, show me an anti-feminist denying as a basic fact that women on average earn less than men. Please show me an anti-feminist who is saying that 77-cent thing is completely made up. Women earn exactly as much as men do on average. What is up for debate here, Eric, is whether the differences in men's and women's earnings are about workplace discrimination, paying women less for the exact same work, which is the position of many feminists, or whether there are other factors involved that can account for the gap and cannot be reliably attributed to workplace discrimination. That is what is up for debate, Eric. What anti-feminists are saying is that women and men, for the most part, earn the same money for the same work. And they do.
It shows you aren't really interested in debate at all.
Really? Not interested in debate. What debate? You have one side, the feminist side, saying women earn 77 cents on a man's dollar for the exact same work, and the other side, the non-feminist and anti-feminist side, saying, well, actually, you're basing that figure on apples to oranges comparisons and essentially comparing librarians, who are mostly women, to metallurgists, who are mostly men, and just claiming the difference is due to employer pay discrimination and sexism against women. I mean, Eric, Obama has been using the 77-cent figure to argue in favor of more cumbersome federal legislation that would only correct employer pay discrimination. It does nothing else. That's all it will do. We need to pass a third federal fucking bill to address workplace discrimination, pay discrimination, that would stop employers from paying women less for the exact same work because women only earn 77 cents on a man's dollar. Now, in reality, when all quantifiable variables are factored in, women earn about the same as men for the same work. And of course, there are some variables that are not sufficiently quantifiable, right, to be included, such as likelihood of negotiating starting pay. I mean, we know men are more likely, but we're not sure how much that would affect their pay. Or production per hour of work. You know, if the job is, say, lifting boxes, and men can lift 10% more boxes an hour than women can. I mean, hey, Eric, would you look at all this nuance non-feminists and anti-feminists are bringing into the discussion, and would you take a fucking look, an honest look at the rhetoric of the feminist side and the nuance contained therein? Women earn 77 cents on a man's dollar for the exact same work, and if you argue, I'll just block you.
That you're ignorant, or that you belong in the extremist anti-feminist or MRA camp.
All you're really arguing here is that views that aren't currently accepted by the mainstream are extremist. That says nothing about whether those views are accurate or correct or a good reflection of reality, right? And I find that particularly interesting given history. I mean, time was people arguing for the rights of homosexuals to not be put in prison. We're arguing a non-mainstream position. An extreme one. Time was people arguing for the emancipation of black slaves in the U.S. were considered extremists. Time was a person with a stated position of agnosticism regarding the existence of God was considered an extremist, while all right-thinking people would never even consider such a thing. Time was the idea of blacks and whites using the same fucking drinking fountain was extremist, and racial segregation was the mainstream position. Now, I suppose the difference between someone like me and someone like you is that I primarily care about evidence and accuracy, and you seem to care about how much a given viewpoint differs from the mainstream. But hey, what do I know? I'm just one of those extremists.
In which case you will not be taken seriously.
By who? People who lie about stuff? People who claim women earn 77 cents on a man's dollar for the exact same work despite reams of evidence to the contrary? Yeah, big loss there.
To take another example, blanket statements about feminism being unnecessary.
Depends on what you mean by feminism, Eric. If by feminism you mean the advocacy of women's rights and interests in areas where they are disadvantaged or marginalized, then I would agree with you. If by feminism you mean an ideology that describes society as being organized to privilege men at women's expense, where violence against women is normalized and encouraged by patriarchal norms, where men hold the majority of positions of power and use that power to benefit men as a group, and where women suffer systemic oppression, yeah, I really don't think feminism is necessary. Not only do I think it's not necessary, I think it's actively harmful, divisive, bigoted, and hateful.
The debate about the necessity of feminism in the West is arguable, but there is no question that feminism is necessary in the majority of countries around the world.
Women's rights advocacy is necessary in the majority of countries around the world, as are holistic approaches to improving the lives of all people, men, women, and children in those cultures. But feminism? The theoretical assertion that societies are constructed by men to benefit men as a group at women's expense? Yeah, I don't think that approach is really the proper one to take. In most of those countries, Eric, life sucks for everybody, not just women. Everyone's rights are infringed, not just women's. In Afghanistan, for instance, almost all sex workers are underage boys, and almost all child laborers are boys. Okay, and the reason why this is the case is because those boys have a financial responsibility, a socially and legally enforced financial responsibility to their mothers, to their sisters, to their female family members. And while feminists are complaining about child brides and girls being excluded from school, right? Well, girls can't go to school because they're not allowed to. Boys can't go to school because they're hauling bricks or offering up their backsides to earn money to support their mothers and sisters. And you know what's really kind of funny, not funny? I stumbled across a video by Stephen Colbert where he was soliciting financial support for a nonprofit aimed at educating girls in developing countries. In the low bar, there was a statistic from UNESCO, and it was presented thusly. 58 million girls worldwide are not in school. Let's get them back into the classroom. That UNESCO report indicated that globally 31 million girls and 27 million boys were not in school. That's what feminism is. taking a problem that affects boys and girls roughly equally, maybe for different reasons, but still affects them roughly equally, and turning it into a misogyny problem, a male privilege problem, not only by erasing all the male victims, but by essentially giving them sex changes. 58 million girls just sounds so much more sexist than 58 million children, roughly half of whom are boys after all. And you know, if we really want to tackle this problem, we have to present it as a problem of sexism against women and girls. I'm going to link you to a video breakdown of a report from the Ottawa Coalition against Violence Against Women. They call themselves Ottawa. And it took figures from a Statistics Canada survey that found 1.2 million Canadians had suffered partner assault in the previous 5 years. 601,000 women and 585,000 men. It then reported this figure as 1.2 million Canadian women. It did the same to the numbers for Ontario, took the combined figure for both men and women, and portrayed it as the number for women alone. Of male victims, Ottawa made no mention whatsoever. That is what feminism does, Eric. And even after Ottawa was called on it, and despite uploading 2 corrected/updated versions of that report, you know, the one thing they didn't correct was that. Are you starting to see why I might be a conscientious objector to feminism at this point? There are only so many lies I can swallow before they stick in my throat. And here you are saying that confronting feminism over its lies, its intentional and unintentional falsehoods, well, that's just confrontational. And I'll be seen as an extremist, and no one will take me seriously because I'm willing to call out liars when they lie.
In online discussions, one might get plenty of support and backslapping, but you surely would know not to make generalized statements like that in real life.
This might surprise you, Eric, but everything I have ever said on my channel, I've been willing to say in real life, and I have. Not just to people I know, right? People I know can't, unfriend me, like my mom, right? But the cashier at the grocery store, co-workers, my boss, anybody. I guess I'm just not as concerned about what people think of me as I am about the truth.
An extra couple of words showing capability of nuanced understanding isn't too much to ask, is it?
Says the guy who posted a screen cap of a tweet and then criticized it for lack of nuance. Really? I do nothing if not incorporate nuance into my discussions on YouTube, and maybe you're not talking about me here, but one of the biggest complaints I get from feminists goes something like this. Oh my god, I hate Karen Strawn. I can't even sit through a minute of any of her videos. So I can literally spend 40 minutes explaining my position, and providing nuance, and providing evidence, and feminists complain that I'm too long-winded, or I never get to the point, or I just muddy the waters with, I guess, nuance, and then brag about how they never even watched any of it. They know I'm wrong, and they know I'm evil, even though they don't know what any of my positions are on anything. For instance, just today, I had a feminist on it was on somebody else's video, but in the comment section. Just fucking today. And she was going around telling everybody in that comment section what my positions were, right? And her assessment of my position on reproductive rights is that I believe a woman's right to choose is inherently misandrist, and that I obviously feel that way because I don't know anything about the risks of pregnancy or, childbirth, or how much a child impacts somebody's life or whatever. I know nothing about this. Obviously, I don't know this because I hold this horrible, atrocious anti-choice position, right? Okay, I have 3 kids. One of them was 11 pounds when he was born. Okay, I know a little something about being pregnant, and I know a little something about, how much it can suck. Okay? What my position really is that it is unjust to give all of the power of decision to bring a child into the world to one of the parties involved, right? Deprive the other party of any say whatsoever, and then force that second party on pain of prison to pay for a child that he had no right to choose exists. She went on in her comment to say that she didn't think it was fair that men are forced to pay for children they didn't want. She agrees with me. She just doesn't know what my fucking position is. Because, you know what? Oh my god, I can't even listen to more than a minute of one of her videos. That's why! And you know, this isn't the new position since I became a confrontational and nasty anti-feminist. This has been their position all along. Back when I was on Reddit, you know, before I got banned from all of the feminist subreddits for introducing nuance, I was really polite. I was really nice. I never name-called. I hardly ever swore, right? I just stuck with the discussion. I just tried to have a rational fucking discussion with them. And even back then, oh my god, your comments are so long. I can't even read past the first few sentences. I can't even. Now do you think, maybe, just maybe, that might be part of the reason why I'm so confrontational?
The fact that certain YouTubers regularly make these types of ignorant statements does not make it true.
No, what makes it true is that it's true. When it comes to the wage gap, as presented by feminists like Obama, that it is caused by women earning less than men for the exact same work, what they are saying is objectively untrue. And what anti-feminists like Sargon are saying is objectively true.
When you trot out these blanket statements, you aren't actually thinking for yourself.
Yeah, none of us actually looked into it or thought about it, right? We all just listened and believed, because that's our motto. That's our favorite hashtag, right?
Rather, you are inadvertently parroting a clickbait headline.
Like how women earn less than men for the exact same work? You mean like that? Like that?
Or a statement made largely for entertainment or shock purposes.
Or for correcting the record purposes. Or is that something you're completely unprepared to consider?
To a partisan audience.
And feminists aren't partisan. Fucking what the fuck? Just give me a moment.
I would request that you consider abandoning anti-feminism.
No thanks. That's an interesting screen cap, by the way. It seems to draw no distinction between ideological opposition to feminism and opposition to the ideology of feminism. My opposition to feminism is not coming from a place where I subscribe to an ideology. It is an opposition to an ideology.
Both in name and in mindset.
Again, no thanks. My mindset is to oppose beliefs that are based on ideology rather than evidence. As such, I am an anti-feminist and proud.
Do not approach feminism with a hostile attitude.
I gotta remind you again what happened when I was still open to approaching feminism in a friendly and non-confrontational, non-hostile way. You know, all those accusations of being a neck-bearded loser who can't get laid or sexually abusing my daughter.
Approach it with an open mind.
9 years, Eric. I've been approaching feminism for 9 years. The first several with an open mind, and all I got was slandered and insulted.
And a willingness to concede where necessary.
Like where? Where should I be willing to concede? Right? At what point should I set aside my devotion to accuracy and fairness in order to concede for the sake of peace or common ground? You know, what lies and half-truths and misleading statistics should I have to choke down and then vomit back out verbatim for the sake of getting along, Eric? And you're going to have to face a truth yourself, Eric. Most non-feminists and anti-feminists are in this because they truly believe that they are right and feminists are wrong. Would you ask feminists who believe they are right to just concede this point or that point to non-feminists or to someone like Milo or Sargon just for the sake of making peace and, creating common ground, right? Are you one of those people who does fallaciously think that the truth always lies somewhere in the middle? That if feminists say X and anti-feminists say Z, the truth must be Y? Right? Or are you merely saying that you should give feminists X for the sake of coexistence, no matter how wrong you might believe they are about it? Now, feminism has been a thing for over 100 years, Eric, and all the mainstream has ever done is incrementally concede the point to them, over and over, for the sake of peace, inch by inch, giving ground, even when they're wrong and everyone knows it. Now, how long did anyone think that was going to last?
Being anti-something is not a constructive way to talk about issues.
So what you're saying is that feminists being anti-patriarchy and anti-sexism is just not constructive.
But you can be non-feminists in your own right.
Oh, God, thank you so much. I so appreciate Eric giving me permission to have my own opinions.
And some of you surely must recognise that the other two categories I'm about to address in your broader anti-feminist camp are either not interested in solutions or are far too angry or emotionally invested.
I'm going to link you to some videos. The Warren Farrell protest, the Nathanson and Young protest, maybe Triggly-Puff, right? And I'm going to let you just have a good long look at that.
We have seen some movement on YouTube already in this regard, and I will be tackling issues related to this subject in a future video.
I can't wait.
Finally, be aware of the financial interests by some of those constantly talking about the dangers of feminism.
You do realize that the director of a battered women's shelter in my province earns more than twice what I do in a year, right? And all of that money is steady, stable, taxpayer money. And that person running that battered women's shelter has to do it according to the feminist paradigm of domestic violence. You do understand that, right? So she's earning money, or maybe he, but probably not. She's earning money from feminism. You do realize that when Anita Sarkeesian does a speaking engagement, she asks between $5,000 and $20,000 in fees alone. I mostly ask for my travel and accommodations to be covered, right? And from our last two events and the next one coming up, not even my travel expenses were covered by the groups that invited me to speak. I'm paying them out of pocket and through voluntary donations. I earn enough through YouTube to have been able to afford to quit my part-time waitressing job. And of course, I have two other sources of income, and my boyfriend covers the majority of the household bills, at least at the moment. If I didn't have a man who was willing to do that, I'd be waiting tables again. I could earn far more money for less effort just going back to slinging ribs and Rickard's Red, regardless of how the fact that I earn all of this money on YouTube, right? Hour for hour, I earned more waiting tables. And while people like Sargon undoubtedly earn more than I do from YouTube and Patreon, they also put out about 10 times as much content. I keep remembering a conversation I had with my boss shortly after I told him, what I was doing online. And we were doing a crossword puzzle together during the slow part of the evening. And I said, I do these videos and stuff. And for the last couple months, I've had people asking me where they can donate money. Now, part of me feels really weird about that because I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it because I believe in it. And I don't want people to think that money is my motivation. Now, he didn't even look up from the puzzle. He was very deadpan all the time. He said, "Do you spend any amount of time on it?" "Yeah." "Do you people value what you do?" "Yeah." "So why are you wasting my time with this stupid question?" Now that was when I put a PayPal button on my blog. Not on my YouTube channel, mind you, which gets a lot more traffic. People would still have to go looking for it, but I put it up and people began sending me money. Now, incidentally, for every donation I receive, I get at least 5 emails from people thanking me for speaking out, thanking me for articulating what their thoughts are. And some not insignificant number of them have said that finding my videos was what convinced them to not commit suicide. So if you think the money is more important to me than that, I suppose you're welcome to your opinion.
Many of you believe that feminists such as Anita Sarkeesian use their position for financial benefit.
We don't believe it. It's objectively true, Eric. It's also true of people like me. If I weren't getting any financial benefit out of this, I'd have much less time to devote to it. I'd still devote some time to it, but I couldn't focus on it the way I do.
Recognize that some of those constantly talking about feminism are doing exactly the same thing.
Well, yeah, except I'm not pulling in $400,000 a year doing this. I'm earning the equivalent of a part-time waitress's pay.
Whether it's a financial incentive or a desire to be popular, the primary motivation isn't the truth.
Well, that's a very sweeping generalization, Eric. How do you even know what my primary motivation is? Have you asked me? Are you aware that I engaged in this debate daily online for over 2 years under various usernames before I even started a blog? And then when my channel got popular, it was another quite a long time, almost a year, before I put that PayPal donation button up there, that I had to be talked into monetizing my videos with ads, right? You can ask Dean Esme. He can probably dig up the chat logs from Skype where we were talking about it, and he was trying to convince me to do it. Do you realize that, I debated Patreon for months before finally setting up an account? My primary motivation is the money, when I could earn more working 30 hours a week waiting tables. When I pay out of pocket to speak for free at events a day's drive away. Why, I guess you know my mind better than I do.
It doesn't necessarily invalidate their arguments.
Oh, how charitable of you, Eric. The fact that I earn a tenth or less of what Anita Sarkeesian does doesn't necessarily invalidate my arguments. I'm so glad to hear that.
But it certainly means that you will always receive a completely one-sided and wholly negative impression about feminism on YouTube.
That's quite the non sequitur, Eric. I suppose you'd say the same thing about feminists who earn their living doing feminism, and the fact that you'll receive a completely one-sided and wholly negative impression of anti-feminists or patriarchy. I mean, I can see how money corrupts, but if we're talking money, there's a lot more to be made by toeing the feminist line than there is by opposing it, even on YouTube. I mean, MTV hasn't come knocking on my door yet. Neither has BuzzFeed, HuffPo, or Gawker, or The Guardian.
Whether you realize it or not, this continual reinforcement will make you less likely to see the other side of the argument.
Gee, and here I thought it was the constant accusations of internalized misogyny, being a gender traitor, pandering to men, being a man, abusing my children, and being a rape apologist that made it difficult for me to see the other side of the argument.
To the large and vocal minority of rabid anti-feminists.
Rabid, huh? Now that's constructive. Sure to encourage a rational and bipartisan conversation.
I'm sorry to say it, but many of you are younger, tend to lack critical thinking, are easy to manipulate, and are quickly triggered by buzzwords.
Oh my god. I'm actually 45, Eric. I'm one of the most well-known anti-feminists on YouTube. My partners at Honey Badger Radio, the most popular MRA anti-feminist group channel on YouTube that I'm aware of, are mostly in their 30s and 40s. 38% of my viewers are 25 to 34 years of age, and another 20% are 35 to 44. Only 15% are under 25. So I'm over 40, and about 15% of my viewers are under 25. Now, how old are Laci Green's viewers on average, Eric? She's 26, and her videos are targeted at a teen and preteen audience, after all. What about Meghan McKay? I asked you to view a video response I made to her. How old is she? How old is her audience? What about Seedling? I can link her in the low bar. What about Milo Stewart? How old is he? Justin Dennis? How old? Marina Shut Up? How old is she? Half these fucking feminists are college students, for fuck's sake. And how old are their target audiences? On the other hand, you have Sargon, Goodfella, V, Skeptor, me, Honey Badger Radio, Paul Elam, Tom Golden, Steve Brule, Janice Fiamengo, The Factual Feminist, and a multitude of others who are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, and into their 60s. Now, I'm willing to bet that if you took a poll of feminist and anti-feminist YouTube channels, you would find that the age distribution would skew quite broadly for anti-feminists, and probably the gender identity and the LGBT status and, and the race and religious status, of the audience, you would probably find that it would skew much more broadly for anti-feminists. And it'd be a lot more narrow for feminists and a lot more young, not just in terms of who's running the channels, but in terms of who the target audience is. Now, if you want to do that research, if you feel so inclined, I would love that. I would love to see the results. But until then, I would really ask you to stop making broad generalizations based on no research or evidence whatsoever about people like me, about anti-feminists, when you've spent a whole huge amount of your video criticizing us for making broad generalizations about feminists. And as for the rest of your video, I'm just going to have to leave it here for now. Maybe I can get to it next week and continue the nuanced discussion. Sorry if you feel like I'm coming down hard on you. Okay. But, like that woman in the comments on that other person's YouTube video who saw fit to announce to everybody in that comment thread what my positions are, completely misrepresent them in ways that make me look like an absolute cunt, right? Because, she just can't be bothered to actually find out what I actually think. This video of yours, right? It really fucking takes the cake. So, maybe next week when I tackle the second part of your video, I won't be quite so angry and things will be a little bit kinder. But I really just wasn't in the mood to be nice today. Anyhow, if you've gotten this far, thanks for listening. Everybody else, thank you for listening. I will be uploading a very brief video that I would like you all to watch regarding the International Conference on Men's Issues and Honey Badger Radio's members being able to get there, and some other stuff dealing with that in the next day or so. So, until then,